Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your morning sessions and that you're enjoying the lunch. Can we take a moment and just give a round of applause to the men and women that are serving lunch for us right now? Thank you so much for your service. We appreciate you. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is off to a great start as the first day of the summit. And hello again to our virtual community that is live streaming and on YouTube. A couple of notes, a couple of things that we want to make sure you do not miss out on this dinner session that's coming later. Founder and CEO of GSV, Michael Moe, will be delivering a keynote address. Then there's the NAACP panel where they'll be talking about equity-driven venture capital. Next up is a conversation that explores the future of coding, where the barriers to building software are lower than ever. Please welcome Rhyu Bahat, head of Bloomberg Beta, and Michele Catasta, president of Replit, for a fireside chat. Give them a round of applause, y'all.
All right. Ooh, they said if we can see everybody, then we're on. So I guess you all are everybody. We're here to talk about coding at the speed of thought. I'm Rhyu Bahat. I'm from Bloomberg Beta, which is a VC firm that was the first VC to invest in Replit. So before I ask you the real questions, and whoever just applauded there, thank you. What is this Replit thing, and how does it help us code at the speed of thought?
Replit is a software creation platform for literally everyone. It's a place where you can go with an idea. We help you to build it with AI. You don't have to have any coding skills, and you can deploy it in front of the entire world.
So I can do that, basically think of Replit as my developer who I might have asked to build something and ask it to build things for me.
Correct.
And this is something that's used by relatively few people at the moment. It's a kind of a hidden secret, or?
I think we recently crossed 40 million registered users.
40 million registered users.
Yep.
Okay. So, you know, you're the CEO and founder of Replit, Amjad Masad, made this comment, I think last week, which is he said, given the state of AI right now, he said, I no longer think you should learn to code. And he and I met more than 10 years ago talking about learning to code. I remember at the time, 2012, you teach at Stanford, and I sat down with the professor who for 27 years taught Stanford's intro computer science class, and he said nobody programs anymore, 10 years ago, because he said it had all gotten too easy. So if that was true then, what does Amjad mean now that nobody should learn to code?
This is a spicy one, as you can imagine. Let's take that sentence and dissect it in the following way. Maybe 99% plus of the people won't need to learn how to write code. And let's go in detail, the reasons why I help you to do that. I do believe that there will be always a small subset of incredibly skilled professional developers that will keep building the systems for the few years to follow. But the gist of the idea there is like similar to the transition that we had from using a pen to using a word processor. The same thing is happening gradually with code. Before you had to have skills almost full stack, like understanding how a computer works, understanding the syntax of a programming language, knowing the basics, and now you can literally vibe code, which is this new hot concept.
And so I want to ask about the skills involved in that, because I kind of think by analogies. So one of the analogies that I have, you can correct me, is I think of it like baking. In the early days of learning to code, you had to mill your own flour. you had to speak directly to the machine sometimes, literally machine language in zeros and ones. Exactly. Then it gets easier and you can buy the flour and get the recipes online and bake the bread. And now you just call up the baker and you're like, build this thing for me. And so for the user of Replit who wants to code at the speed of thought and wants to build something, is there a skill involved in using, like telling the developer what to do? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, definitely it's a brand new skill. It doesn't require you to understand programming languages, as you said, but you need to approach, especially our system, in a different way. You can definitely code at the speed of thought. You express yourself exclusively in natural language, but you can start by saying, point by point exactly everything that you want the system to build and expect it to be done completely, like after hours or days. At least we are not there yet today. The level of autonomy of agents is improving, like every 6 months is doubling at this point, so you could expect this to happen in a few years. But now the muscle you have to train is making sure you break down into smaller problems and let the agent build, step by step.
Knowing how to explain it well, be crisp about what you want. Now, you use this word agent, which is one of these words that now everybody talks about and nobody quite knows what it means. In this context, what is the Replit agent?
So Replit agent is a system that goes from a natural language prompt, so similar to, I'm sure everyone in this room has used ChatGPT, but rather than giving you back a textual answer or like generating an image, we create code for you. And rather than just writing the code, we also execute it, we debug it on your behalf, and we show immediately the progress that the system is making.
Okay, so let's explore that. The Replit agent was first released how long ago?
7 months ago, September 2020.
7 months ago. So I remember using maybe a just pre-release version, and it was buggy. It was hard to use. And then yesterday on the plane, to test myself out, maybe we can put this up, I made something, probably took me less than 10 minutes of typing time, a little more time once our friends backstage put our screenshot up on the screen. And it worked. And so while we're waiting for that to come up, what has changed in the last few months that took this thing from not working to working?
First of all, we were embarrassed when we launched it. We've been embarrassed for a while until when it was around. We don't regret it, because we learned a lot from our users. We learned what wasn't working, the assumptions we made that were wrong. But eventually what changed is a combination of AI making incredible progress in the last 6 months, and us building on top of how LLMs are becoming more powerful, and at the same time, understanding everything that didn't work with the first version and going through this very long list of fixes that we made.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say I experienced that firsthand. For folks who can now see this up on the screen, can people see this application up on the screen? You can snap the QR code if you want to try it yourself. What I'll say is that what I made is an application that allows you to type in what you're interested in here at ASU+GSV, because this is my first time here, and I'm like running into lots of people who I adore, but then I'm like, I don't know who else is here and what we want to meet about. Put in your email address, and then it's going to use AI at the end of the conference, so early next week we'll do this, to matchmake you with whoever the person is whose interest is most similar to yours, and then it'll send you both an email and say, this is your ASU+GSV match. So made in less than 15 minutes, and for me, the aha was, okay, I can make an initial version of something. And so maybe let's just talk for a second about what are some of the limits. I mean, the first thing that I made with Replit with the help of somebody else was a bot that responded to any question you had with the most appropriate verse from Hamilton, from the musical. And so that was a pretty simple piece of software. It was kind of fun. But what's just beyond what something like a software agent can do on your behalf right now?
I think the limitation now is the fact that we have a few API paths that we provide to the users. As you said, you built a web app. We're extremely good at that. You can create data dashboards. We recently launched a stack to create video games. It's been adopted, especially by a lot of teenagers.
The kids love the video games.
There you go. We built it for him. And on the flip side, though, there are some other applications that are far more low level, maybe closer to the hardware, and we are still not great at them. Now, I want to extrapolate from this statement that Amjad gave. It doesn't mean that agents will never be able to accomplish those tasks. It's more a matter of how more powerful AI is going to become over time, and also how much time we will spend to specialize our agent on those use cases. But in all honesty, our company mission is empowering the next billion software creators. I don't expect a billion people out there to want to create the next scalable database system. Conversely, I expect a billion people wanting to create web apps and internal tools in their companies to simplify their lives.
Okay. So for those, so we have 1,000 or so of those next billion in this room. And actually, can I just ask by a show of hands, how many of you have written software before? Okay, we have like a good segment, but the vast majority of people have not, which means anybody who didn't raise your hand is now in the target market.
You should all download Replit on your phone.
Yeah.
Because we have a mobile app. You can build software, start now, by the time we get out of stage.
Oh yeah, I should say,
something.
the application that I built probably took me a total of like 12 to 15 prompts back and forth, of which the first 8 or 9 I did on the plane on my cell phone. And so, this is literally something that is possible now. So let's just talk about limits a little more. I want to build a startup. I want to build some education technology company. Should I fire all my engineers?
You should start on your own rather than
start on your own.
Yeah, start on your own.
Meaning never hire them in the first place? Perhaps.
Eventually,
okay.
Yeah, when you hit a bottleneck.
And a lot of what I've seen in a mature software company, I mean, we've invested in companies that have gone the distance. Weights and Biases, an AI infrastructure company, was just acquired by CoreWeave. That's just gone public or announced acquisition by CoreWeave. A lot of what engineers seem to do is not build the first version of the thing. It's continuously improve the thing, make it more responsive, fix issues. What's the right way to think about that, the rest of the life cycle of a piece of software after the initial build in this agents world?
So that is why, even Daria Moderator and Anthropic said, I expect the vast majority of tokens of code to be written by LLMs and not humans. Take the example of code migrations. They tend to be fairly deterministic.
So a code migration meaning I have a legacy old code base, I want to go and take it and make it modern and functional.
This one is a bit too ambitious. Say you want to go from COBOL to Java, that takes quite a lot of work. Say you want to update a library or a framework version. Most of them don't require, they're just tedious tasks. They require you to write a lot of code, but it's almost always the same. Like it pattern matches very easily. You can do all of this now with AI. Not supremely reliably, like not 100% reliable, but definitely you can create all the code and have a human reviewing what the AI has done.
Well, did I interrupt you? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The line that I've heard from Eric Brynjolfsson from the Stanford economist is that AI won't replace people, but people who use AI will replace people who don't. And so I think about that with these code migrations, where we invest in a company called Mechanical Orchard that does this. And one of their observations is, if you have an ancient code base, which let me just ask, how many of you work with school systems? Okay. Yeah, their code bases tend not to have been built on this stack, not to have been built on the previous stack, but depending how far you go, sometimes the stacks are decades old, and there are very few living developers who know COBOL, let's say. But the AI doesn't care. It can go back as old as you want. And so the question that I have for you is, for the software engineers who are the most empowered at using these AI tools, how do they operate now differently from how they operated 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago? What's changed for those developers?
Couple of things. I think they're seeing the productivity going up pretty much on a weekly basis, and it's a function of models, LLMs becoming better, and also engineers learning how to interact with AI better, like at the right time.
The bicycles are getting better, and we are learning how to ride the bicycles.
The engineers are trained on the bicycle even more. And at the same time is also which additional tools are available in their tool set. So for example, I can write a web app on my own, but why wouldn't I do that on Replit Agent? It's going to save me time. And now I can do 10 of them in parallel.
Well, and you made this comment at one of your Stanford talks about how the agents have shown you as a professional, Dr. Catasta, PhD developer and researcher, the agents have taught you things. And so what have you learned from the agents in working with them?
I think my thought process when I write software is much different from how agents behave. The way in which they are debugging, especially the Replit Agent V2, which we launched literally a month ago in preview, as a way of debugging of funding problems or creating shortcuts that sometimes I can't even think of myself.
Got it. So it's proposing solutions to you that you may not have seen, and fundamentally thinking differently about it. I mean, for those of you who make software, one of the analogies that I heard, or explanations of this moment, and I'm just curious if you agree, we've spent a lot of time in the tech industry moving from so-called waterfall development to agile development. Waterfall, I specify the requirements up front, and then somebody goes off and builds the thing, and it was seen to be a brittle way to build because there weren't enough feedback loops built in, and you could go off track pretty quickly. Whereas agile, you check in once every 2 weeks, let's say, you do rapid sprints. It seems like AI may have broken this, that in some ways we're back to waterfall development, except that the developer team can then go and take your requirements and build it in 10 minutes instead of in 10 months. Does that land with you or no?
It's a very short waterfall, though.
A short waterfall,
Yes.
I love that.
It's like a small hop.
And I guess, the short waterfall is pretty similar from being quite agile in the sense that now 2 weeks seems like an eternity to build.
Yeah, it's agile by definition. It moves fast. You just think few steps ahead. And then when you see the new artifact that you created, that's when you make decisions of what you want to do after.
That makes sense. Okay, I'm going to ask you one or two more questions about the present, and then we'll move to the future. The wide range of users of software agents building on their behalf, and with Replit in particular, what has surprised you about what people are building? Is there some example or two of something where you just thought, wow, never would have occurred to me?
We talk about COBOL for reasons that I still don't know why, but now I have to bring an example
But
from
COBOL,
there.
just for folks who don't know, is an ancient programming language. It's like basically written on stone tablets kind of stuff.
All your money is being moved by COBOL as we speak. Banks are using it predominantly. So we have a company, very large one, that is adopting Replit Agent, and their entire software system was built in COBOL. Now, rather than hiring a lot of professional software engineers to go from COBOL to Java, they're just taking a huge leap, like jumping over 2-3 different eras and building the new stack directly with Replit Agent. It was the most fascinating enterprise use case that I heard of. Rather than trying to rewrite line by line, they take the core functionality of their software and they just rewrite it from scratch with the agent because they can move really fast.
I love that. And, there's been a lot of talk about solopreneurs and their uses for this. 1 billion creators means many of those people are going to be working on their own. In 2015, I wrote an essay called The One-Person Billion-Dollar Startup. I don't think we've quite gotten there yet, although we're still waiting on it. What do you see individuals building using these kinds of tools as opposed to what organizations are doing?
A bit of everything, ranging from consumer apps, they try to go viral, or like they offer services at large. And these are people that are already making like 6-figure ARR easily. And it's probably their third, fourth side business in life. And at the same time, we also see people building internal tools in their companies. And it's very interesting. They adopt Replit because they heard of it through word of mouth or on social. They build a prototype, their colleagues check them, and then all of a sudden they just explode internally.
Yeah, I think it was first from Amjad that I heard the expression personal software.
Yeah.
And so what is personal software as part of that?
So personal software is, imagine your phone. Each single app has been built by someone else. And I think most of them you install them. You might use 1 or 2 features for each one. They're not customized towards your need. Now thinking of rebuilding all of them based on your own personal needs, that's the vision where we're going towards.
Is that I will make my own software just for me, and that's completely okay. And in a sense, a custom GPT can be like that. I mean, the tools are starting to allow this. Okay, now let's just turn, while we have a few more minutes, to the future. It seems like things are changing really fast right now. I mean, we had in our portfolio, I think it was a week or two ago, an emergency meeting because in the last month, so many new tools had come out that the founders of tech startups, venture-backed founders, because they're backed by us, had to have an emergency meeting to discuss this. So when you think about what's about to change, as I look ahead for the next few weeks and months, what's changing right now?
I would say 2 things. One is the level of autonomy is steadily climbing over time.
The level of autonomy, what does that mean?
Of agents. So the fact that you can assign a task to them, and not only they're becoming more reliable, but they can also work on a longer horizon. So they can fulfill something, and maybe the first agent we launched was working for a couple of minutes in a row at most. Now you can launch Replit Agent V2, and it's going to take 15, 20 minutes to complete an entire task. And I expect this to go to 1 hour plus by the end of the year.
Got it. So it can go off on its own with a longer leash.
Yeah, so much more ambitious in terms of what it can accomplish.
Okay.
And at the same time, what says also there will be a horizontal expansion where agents can be applied. They all started from low-stakes environment. Like, I do hope no one is building healthcare patient record on Replit agent yet. You know, there are all these aspects.
Not quite ready for life or death consequences without being checked by somebody.
Exactly. But I think there are a lot of low-stakes apps that can be built, that can be customized, that can be personalized, which you can do with agents today, and it's going to happen more and more.
Yeah, I mean, low stakes, and that's sort of how I thought about the ASU+GSV matchmaking app, which, by the way, if you didn't get the URL, it's just ASU+GSV 2025.replit.app.
Yeah.
And, low stakes things. There was this idea, and I'll just get a little philosophical in this question. There was this idea that as people started playing, making things for themselves, making toys, making applications that their sports team might use, or their school might use, or just their classroom might use, there was this idea, that dream goes back to the early days of the internet, almost, that people would be empowered. I remember that New Yorker cartoon that said on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, where a dog is browsing the internet. And I think the implication there was that it would be better for everybody and democratize things and make us more equal to each other. And it doesn't seem like the internet has done that. Do you think that this next phase will feel more egalitarian or be more egalitarian, or will it bring us more of the same? And how do you think about that?
I strongly believe that, and not even based on coding agents, which of course I care very much about, but think of how LLMs are being embraced and adopted. I think as of today, as of now, ChatGPT has 400 million weekly active users. It's a democratized technology. Like most of the IL tech usually works in a top-down fashion. It goes like from government, it goes from very rich companies, and eventually it gets in the hands of everyone. LLMs are incredibly, a democratizing factor, and the same is going to happen with.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Web 2 started, it was okay. Instead of being broadcast to you, you can now interact with these applications. It's almost like Web squared now, in the sense that you can create and build the applications. So folks should download the Replit app from the App Store and try it. Anything else they should do before we wrap?
Build an app. Come to find me in the hallway in case you need any help.
Well, thank you for the research you started long before it was cool. And now, if this is what cool is, then we're cool. And now 1 billion more people can try it, thanks in part to the work of Replit. So thank you very much, and thanks everybody for being here, and I hope you build things.
Thank you.
What a great conversation. And really, backstage, Michele told me he was hoping that some of you come up to him and ask him questions, so there is permission to go ahead and do that. Everyone, I've been involved in the K-12 education equity sector for over 20 years, and I've had my share of attending conferences and summits, but there's truly something special about this one right here, and the magic is truly in the mix. And we're gonna put that to the test here, okay? I want, by show of hands, how many educators, district leaders, people that work in the school systems, can you please raise your hand and keep them up? All right, look around, so that way you can visually get to know the people that are here. Shout out to our education folks. All right, next. How many people do we have representing the investment capital space? Foundations, investors, all right. And they're like, I'm not gonna raise my hand, and I'm gonna get hit up left and right. This lady's crazy. It's a safe space, y'all. No, it's not, I'm joking. Let's see who's representing the tech space. You're creating these incredible, okay, here we go. All right, look around, get familiar. Wonderful, wonderful. The magic is really in the mix. And one thing that happened last night that I so appreciated at the reception is talking to the person who's gonna be moderating this conversation. Jessie Woolley-Wilson. I call her my Caribbean sister. She's from Haiti, I'm from Puerto Rico. Do we have any Caribbean brothers and sisters in the crowd here? Any Puerto Ricans, Boricuas, are you here? Okay, Jamaicans, any Jamaicans? Okay, I see you. He's like, I'm the only one. But there really is truly a sense of camaraderie, and the inclusion here is amazing. And I was having the best conversation with the moderator of our next panel, and we just connected. And I gotta say that doesn't really happen a lot in these spaces with summits and conferences. So our next conversation brings together some of the most influential voices in education investing for a candid look at where the smart money is going in EdTech. Moderated, like I said, by Jessie Woolley-Wilson, operating partner at Owl Adventures. Sharing their insights with Jessie are Jason Brein, partner at Francisco Partners, Bethlam Forsa, president and CEO of Savvas Learning Company, Adam Nordin, managing director in technology group at Goldman Sachs, and Richard Sarnoff, chairman of media at KKR America's Private Equity. Y'all help me welcome this stellar lineup of leaders who are shaping the investment landscape in learning.
Well, welcome. We are excited to be here. We heard a lot of forks and knives clicking. It's always a challenge to have a conversation when you're fighting with food. So we appreciate your attention and engagement. So we are here to talk about deep pockets, thematic focus, and investor appetite for EdTech. We want to talk on stage about things that are whispered about in the background a little bit. So is EdTech investing, as we understood it, dead? I'll just say that it was a couple of years ago that I sat on this stage with Bill Gates, and he announced that the first stage of AI investment was going to be philanthropic, even if investors didn't realize that. So my question to this esteemed panel here is, with all of the froth in the AI industry, has your appetite for investment changed, and has your approach to investment changed? Richard, I might start with you. You had talked about the investing like an art historian.
Yes, well, I think I'm happy to answer the question, but I do want to say it's a beautiful day outside. So I think it'll be better to do class outside. If you could all just do single file. No, I think the question is pretty germane in that AI is changing markets, not just in education, but in pretty much every industry. And it's commoditizing things that we didn't think could be commoditized, like knowledge and thinking, and changing the landscape of certainly what we need to teach, what we need to test, what we need to train as a society. That means you are going to have a different view on what you invest, how you invest, what the services are around that, and how you transform your own companies that are in existing markets that are, again, already being affected by this technology. So there is no hiding your head in the sand. This is real, and it is already here, and it is changing almost every month. So at KKR, we do have a philosophy of what I would call ratable investment, where we don't invest more at a certain time and less at another time in terms of the overall scope of what we do. We try to be pretty steady, and through markets that have high multiples and low multiples, et cetera. But we are thematic investors, and there are certain themes that are, in our judgment anyway, are worth investing in and some that are not. Right now, there are aspects of EdTech that are absolutely worth investing in, and we have. You saw it with the investment we made in Instructure recently. And there are some that are not, and I'll leave it to my other panelists to identify those. But I think the answer to the original question, is EdTech dead? Well, if it were, there would be no one in the audience, and it looks like a pretty full house. So,
Adam, what are your thoughts about maybe some of the traditional industries?
I guess I have to be the eternal optimist because it's my job to find and facilitate investment in education technology. But I I guess, two different ways that I look at it. Number one, I'm always the bull on investing in education and education technology because it's great business everywhere in the world. So if you just start with the foundation of demographics, economic growth, and policy, you've got a great market for education. And in part, it's because education drives economic growth, so it's circular. You add technology to it, and that expands your addressable market. So the opportunity is bigger because you can transcend geography, you can shift time, and you can use technology to make education better. And you do that through ways that make it adaptive and predictive and personalized, and you drive better results. And ultimately, the models look different because there's always a new technology, but the thesis is just as powerful. And I feel like, to me, I'm super excited about AI. I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. It's just another technology moment in time that we have seen impact technology broadly and impact education technology for 30 years. So every time something happens, PCs, the internet, software as a service, cloud, social media, data analytics, all of these things, now it's AI. It will make education more powerful and better. I don't think it replaces teachers. Maybe we can reduce class sizes, but there will always be a human in the loop. Just the value add will be different. And ultimately, if we use technology to make education more effective and to reach more people, then that will drive better economic outcomes for the entire world.
We're very excited about AI, and we cannot afford not to invest in AI. So we are actively investing in AI. We're experimenting with AI because at the end of the day, we have been in this industry, I've been in this industry for a while now. We've been talking about personalized learning. And finally, I mean, we are in the world of machine learning, we've done all of it, but finally, we can be at that nirvana world of actually delivering on true personalized journey for students. So we're excited about the possibility, and we cannot afford to stay on the sideline. And also, the other aspect, when we look at it, is AI is going to advance. It's not AI for the sake of AI. It's AI enabling and advancing learning and teaching. Does it do something better than the way we've done it in the past? And I think that's how we come at it. So everything is increasing effectiveness of learning, focus on outcome, speed, right? Does it help teachers be more effective because it now allows them to spend more time teaching and allowing them to create lesson plans and so forth quicker, faster? So the productivity tool for teacher, the business case is very clear. In terms of the support for student to personalize that learning journey is clear. But clearly, as Adam said, we believe teacher, human in the loop, because that magic that happens in the classroom when the relationship between a teacher and her student cannot be replaced by a machine. So we feel we're very excited about it. And one other thing to talk about is when we talk about AI, it's not just about the impact on product. We also think about it, we have employees. So they need to be building skills for the future across the board, from production to delivery, right? And everything in between. So we think of it as this universal overall capability that's changing the world, and our employees need to have the capability, the knowledge, the experience to work in AI in everything they do.
When you mentioned this conversation with Bill Gates, I assume what he meant was most of the early AI experiments are going to fail, right? And that's what he meant by philanthropic, sort of tongue-in-cheek. It will be an investment in humanity figuring out AI. And I think that is true, but there's a bifurcation between the infrastructure layer of AI, which is very, very, very expensive to build and costs tens of billions of dollars, if not more, with no promise of return. And then there is the AI experimentation at the pointy application level, which turns out to be very, very cheap. And so will most of that fail? Almost all of it. But the good news is that it's cheap enough that even if it works just a little, and you can iterate quickly, and you can iterate often, and you can get feedback frequently, then it does have the potential to be both a contribution to the overall AI ecosystem, but also have an opportunity to make the kind of impact that you want to make in our environment. And for us, that includes good return on capital.
So if rapid experimentation is the pathway to lasting, measurable, maybe scalable impact in education, what do investors need to do to inspire rapid experimentation among the companies you invest in?
Make it okay to fail. Make it okay to, or make it required to close feedback loops quickly. Set the expectation that decisions will be made quickly. In the typical mode of product level experimentation, it may take months in order for a product team to get the conviction to declare something ineffective and to stop it. With AI, the technology tools are there to make that decision more quickly, but the cultural constitution of an organization hasn't changed. So really, what is hardest, I think, about rapid experiment in AI isn't the technology, it's the people. And getting alignment and say, hey, we humans have to move at the speed of AI. And then there are all the good reasons why human beings shouldn't be moving at the speed of AI, right? All the safety protections, that is an entirely different conversation. So I view almost the technology moves so fast and is so effective and can facilitate so much experimentation at such a low cost that actually the real question for organizations to answer is, how fast do we want to move? With what protections? How can we get in front of our customers and do right by our constituents?
Yeah, I think that's really, that last one is the key thing, because if you have the rapidity of development, experimentation, and market launch that AI allows for, you also have a rapidity of disruption of everything that you do, including those new things that you just did. So the cycles of disruption get more and more narrow, more and more speedy. So then where things really get interesting is, what kind of moats do you have to build? What kind of moats do you already have to have, whether those are in distribution or brand or approach or people or whatever, that will allow you to survive an incredibly rapid and accelerating disruption cycle that's enabled by these new technologies. That's an interesting question for, I think, all of us to think about in terms of the enterprises that we're either building or working on, because we're going to all have to confront it.
Are we seeing, Adam, an appetite among investors to make failure okay? I mean, if the hit rate has to go up, if we have to have rapid experimentation in order to find the thing that does work, and it's a lot cheaper to do rapid experimentation, are you seeing investors with the intestinal fortitude to say, maybe I have to invest in 15 experiments in order to get one that is commercially viable?
You have that intestinal fortitude on the stage. We need to be able to tolerate these rapid experimentations and failures if that is what happens. I'll leave it to Adam to comment on whether the overall market is rewarding that, but leadership requires it today.
So I think a lot of it has to do, so your ability to maintain the velocity of investment and to accept failure, that's kind of a concept of how you need to think about it in the R&D context. I think there's also, you have to consider, how do you think about it in the field? How do you think about it in the boardroom? And how do we measure success? Because in part, it really is informed by the nature of the market that you serve, because the adoption cycle and the rate of embracing technological change is different in K-12, in higher education, and in enterprise. And if you try to take an enterprise mindset and apply it to K-12, it's too hasty, because K-12 is a very deliberative and iterative adopter of technology. It's a sophisticated buyer. It's also a complicated buyer. But people who are deeply ingrained in the K-12 ecosystem for this example will understand that. And so when we think about how do we continue to drive innovation so that we have, a basis of sustainable differentiation over time, they have to think about, you have to take a long-term view so that you don't cut off the innovation effort before it has time to bloom. And so it's one of the reasons why at this conference, if you have, presence of professional investors like Richard or Jason, these are specialists that understand the nuance and the difference in the context of each market, and where I personally have typically seen, less success is when the investor perhaps is less informed on the nature of the end market and therefore doesn't have the patience to allow the benefits of the investment to yield.
What about the leadership profile? So when you think about this new world, you think about the rapid innovation and experimentation, you think about the kind of elusive impact we've had collectively on learning. What kind of leader and leadership team do we need that's different now in this age of AI versus, say, 5 years ago? And what happens if you like the solution, but you don't see that team?
You all looking at me? Okay. Do you want to start, Bethlam?
Since you run a company?
So I think from a leadership perspective, there's no more critical time than today. It's extremely important. Leadership is becoming extremely, extremely important because it's not just, there is so much change taking place across the board and internally, externally. So from a leadership perspective, what you are going to need versus what you may have needed a few years ago is you're going to need somebody who truly understands disruption, has lived through disruption, as well as a visionary. But I come back to, you need to understand the market dynamics. You need to understand implementation. At the end of the day, we can have all sorts of leadership. If the leader is only, the strength is in one particular area, the voids are going to come back to plague us. So one of the things we've noticed when it comes, particularly right now with a number of AI-related initiatives, is the critical element we're seeing within that is cross-functional collaboration. Because it's not like there is an AI department that creates stuff. There isn't. It is infused across everything you do. So when you're thinking, if you're doing a product, you're not going to need just the pedagogist, the technologist, the production, but you're going to need the designers, the UI, UX individual. You're going to need everybody from the beginning to the end in the process. So you need leadership that fosters collaboration as well as provides the room. Failure is okay, like what we talked about earlier. So I think what we're seeing is an era where it's important to understand this type of leadership is what's needed in the market.
But would you agree, though, that there's tension? So a lot of the solutions that we're talking about might not end up being billion-dollar market cap companies. Maybe they're going to be purchased by incumbents. Maybe the incumbents are going to purchase them because they want to purchase the culture of innovation as much as the solution. So what do the large incumbents need to do to preserve the vitality and innovation of tuck-ins so that they can grow and learn and evolve? There's a lot of entrepreneurs out here that will probably end up being in a transaction and being part of a larger organization. What do the big guys have to do to keep that sector vital? Jason, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you're a larger company acquiring a smaller company, you got to know why you're doing it. Sounds obvious, and what you're hoping to get from it. There's a fairly famous series of business school studies that were published talking about how most strategic M&A, i.e. big company buying a small company type M&A, fails. And so just as a starting point, the odds are against you. But there are various sort of approaches you can analyze the situation with to increase the odds of success. So one really good sort of understanding is having a real level of humility about what it is that your company, the acquiring company, is in the minds of its customers, and whether that is actually overlaps and jives with the business that you're buying. I think buying a larger company, buying a smaller company for its culture is probably, if it's just that, is probably not a great premise. I think a larger company buying a smaller company, though, for its way of iterating and developing products quickly and having a new route to market, and having that route to market have a lower cost of customer acquisition, for example, and generating new customers being led by product versus by marketing, that's cultural. There's an element of that, but it's a dramatically different thesis, and that is a plausible foundation for an acquisition. So I think a lot of this, a lot of the new technologies make this level of product development iteration possible, that introduces a whole new level of possibilities for M&A, but as a buyer, kind of buyer beware. You can't kill the thing you just bought.
Yeah, I'd like to address that as well, because I think the two questions you just asked are connected in an interesting way. What leadership requires these days of rapid dislocation and change is something a little different from what it did in the past, in that if you go far enough in the past, life was rewarding generalists, who could kind of do everything, the typical MBA general manager who would figure everything out. Then life started rewarding specialists who really knew something deeply and could go deep and build something and fill around maybe the lacks that they had to create a great enterprise. I think now we're coming into a place where, as you said, we need cross-pollination and cross-functional understanding, but we also need self-knowledge and empathy in our leadership, and that is a kind of core skill that some of the studies we've done at KKR, our best leaders have that, and they've produced the best results. And this is kind of a new generation of leadership that can recognize when they don't know something, recognize when a new company they may buy has something that they can't touch because it is really the special sauce of what they're buying, and then not touch it.
Is that part of your rubric? Like when you evaluate an investment, you look at the product market fit, you look at the solution, the promise, you look at the business economics. Do you actually look for those qualities in leaders?
Yeah, we do, and I think you do.
We look at our own teams and we say, do we have the team that can nurture this sort of investment? Like, can we make the best of this business that we're going to spend a whole bunch of money buying? And sometimes we have, all of our teams have strengths. In this day and age, I mean, you just said it, you used the word empathy. Empathy is the right word. With the pace of technological progress, the shortage actually just in society, and so not surprisingly in our companies, is like empathy, right? And like having empathy for your world around you in a world that moves so fast is really, really critical. And it's really hard to blend technology progress without customer empathy, especially in this market, which is a deeply human market, right? Like this is one of the, I believe that this is going to be the very last market where technology replaces humans, if it ever does. This is the last one. And so that makes this human element even more important.
Just to add to that, Richard talked about the importance of being honest. We call that intellectual honesty. And what we have actually learned, we've done a number of tuck-in small acquisitions. And what we have learned is we each learn from each other. There are these unbelievable expertise these small companies bring in that particular area. And then we, as a large educational company, have a whole other things we bring to market. And what we're seeing is when the two of us combine forces and work together, we see this unbelievable creativity that comes out of it. Because, and that's why we retain these acquisitions we make. And because what we're noticing is It brings in a specific solution that combined with other things, it's 1 + 1 = 3, as a lot of the investors usually say. And it's great to be able to see that real time. And when we do the acquisition, we look at it in that way. Oh, that, we can never get there at the speed they got there. There is something unique here. And we're honest about the fact that what this team has done is better, and we want to be able to be part of them. And together, we can bring a better solution that's going to make a difference in learning and more impactful at the end of the day.
That level of humility, right, that you use to describe that, that is common among great leaders today. I don't think you would find that among too many large company CEOs in, say, 2005 or 2010, right? So, like, just how big companies think about dealing with little companies in an era where change happens so rapidly is evolved.
So we can't. I
just want to add, because I think these are really great perspectives for, from the point of view of how do you manage a company as a leader and cultivate innovation, how do you sort of think about informing the culture of the companies that you invest in. The question that you were asking is like, how do we ensure that small companies continue to innovate, number one, and number two, is there a role or responsibility of the larger companies? On the latter, I don't think there's any responsibility for larger companies. Like they would prefer to innovate themselves and just compete against the small companies, but you approach this point of, there's a buy versus build if they do it better and they're already doing it. And so that's just a function of cost of capital and whether the price is worth acquiring it. And the risk is that you don't want to acquire it and break it. And that's the cultural element. And so assessing culture and cultural fit is a really important part of M&A, even though it has nothing to do with the business case. But I think for the smaller companies, you have to remember that it all resides in the context of innovation is about access to capital and deployment of capital. And we work through different periods of where capital is abundant and it's free, and points where it's not available at all. And so if you're a small company and you're innovating, internally you want to have that imagination and creativity and sort of like, let's go for it. But I think there also needs to be a mindset that is commercially self-aware, because these periods ebb and flow, they don't last forever. And the main point of it is to innovate and be successful before you run out of money. So you have to kind of think about it that way, and that is why we see good companies that either start to hit a wall because they're managing down their innovation to preserve capital because the capital is not available, and perhaps that becomes a good acquisition target at a reasonable price for another company that has more capital, can reinvigorate the innovation. But the fact that we have, and technology drives us, and a lot of the different technologies I mentioned earlier, they create exuberance in the market. It's just this, limitless opportunity, and we throw capital at it. And it's one of the things that makes the U.S., so innovative, is that it's the most efficient market for accessing capital and support for deployment of capital. So I don't think, you can take an immediate moment in time, which is there's still a bit of a hangover from like the peak valuations that we hit in 2021 that's caused people to be conservative. This sector in particular has like an endless desire for innovation. And part of it is because people just, you want to make it better, you want to contribute more, and people want to be commercially successful. It's okay to sort of, be financially successful while you make a dramatic impact to communities and the entire ecosystem that we sit in. But it's a really difficult balance. It's an equilibrium that you have to find, and sometimes you over-index on the spend, and the company doesn't disappear, it just gets bought. And sometimes if you undermanage the innovation, then you're just sort of like running in place. But I think that's the culture combined with the financial discipline that you have to have in the context of a non-philanthropic investment.
So Adam, just where are we now in that cycle, right now?
So I feel like it's interesting because we are seeing different behavior from different types of investors. I think you have a conservative point of view from VCs at the moment, and this relates to education technology, where at certain points, if you looked in kind of 2018 to 2021, the VC activity and deployment of capital was very, very strong. What you are seeing, on the other hand, though, is a much larger degree of participation from long-term oriented capital. And this may align to the concept that you need to be more patient to cultivate innovation, because the velocity of innovation doesn't always match the velocity of adoption. So if, depending on the market that you're in, long-term oriented capital can be better, and that can be anything from a core fund like KKR would manage. It can be, Jason, you naturally, your firm overall has a very flexible path it's not sort of rigid to deployment and exit. But the participation that we see from family offices, that we see from pensions, sovereigns, other types of long-term or permanent capital. And I personally think, while it's already present on the education services side, so if you look in K-12 types of school operations, higher education, there already is participation today by infrastructure funds, which are taking a 15 to 20-year horizon. It hasn't quite extended to the technology that supports the operations yet, but I think it'll be a natural evolution. So you may see a change in the type of investor, but it is in part informed by the moment in time, too. If we get into another period of a strong market run, you'll see more capital come at the sector.
I thought that was a yes or no question. But,
Well, we can't paint EdTech with one brush. I think, Adam, you said that to me when we were chatting earlier. Are you guys excited about any specific subsector now that you're a little more excited about than you might have been 3 or 4 years ago? And where does workforce readiness fall in your pecking order? Anybody? Bella?
We're very excited about upskilling, and overall college and career readiness aspect of the business. There is a significant need. What we're seeing is, from a sector perspective, is there's K-12, and then within K-12, and I call it K-12 going into higher ed, the whole notion of, we know students today are graduating and they don't have the skill necessary, whether they go to college or join the workforce or both, how to help them develop those skills. So I think that area is very interesting area and growth opportunity.
So we're almost out of time. Anybody have a sector that they're less enthusiastic about?
well, that pisses people off, so I'm not going to answer that question. But I will say, mark your calendars. This is the date where a couple of private equity guys came up and talked about empathy. So that's a thing.
Well, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Private equity and empathy. That's an oxymoron, right? Feels that way, at least. So who here loves a full circle moment? I don't know about you, but it feels so life-affirming and purpose-affirming. Coming up next is a conversation between two powerhouses in the world of education and leadership. Jonathan Greer, widely considered as an EdTech GOAT for his visionary leadership at Kaplan and beyond, joins Kate Eberle Walker, CEO of Presence, for a fireside chat that promises insights, wisdom, and maybe even a few good stories. Kate once worked for Jonathan and talked about him in her book, The Good Boss. So this is not just a conversation, it's a full circle moment between two leaders who've helped shape this future of education. Everyone, Jonathan Greer and Kate Eberle Walker.
Hello, hi everybody. So Jonathan, good to be here with you. I'm pretty excited for the opportunity to sit up here and ask Jonathan some questions. So I went to work for Jonathan 20 years ago. I first met him 27 years ago. I was a young investment banker at Goldman Sachs. I had probably worked all night on some models and some slides, put together a presentation, went into his CEO office at Kaplan with my banking team to present. And those of you who've been in banking know that when you're the junior member of the team, you do all that work, and then you're lucky if you get to go to the meeting, and then you sit kind of in the back row quietly. Not in my meeting with Jonathan. He interrupted the senior banker shortly into the presentation and pointed to me and said, "Does she talk?" And he said, did you build this model? I said, yes. And he made the senior banker switch seats with me and proceeded to ask me a lot of questions. So the tables are turned today, Jonathan.
Yes, they are. Hello, everyone. Good to be here with you all. Go for it, Kate. Let's have some fun.
So let's have some fun. So I'm going to get straight to the big question. So everyone wants to know from you, you've been investing in and building businesses in our sector for decades. You've made a lot of smart decisions, and they've often been, unexpected or, bold at the time. So we've got funding is shifting, regulatory environment is shifting, and the markets are fluctuating. Are you a buyer or are you a seller in education?
Well, I want to start by saying that when I first presented at this conference, or its preceding conference, there were more presenters than attendees. So it's great to see this many people doing what we all love to do. Am I a buyer or a seller? I'm an operator who wants to build and will build by buying when I can. But it's what starts for me at the very beginning is building the best company that delivers the best student results. We are at a time and a place of immense change in our world, and there's one incredibly important fact we all have to put out there. We spend $750 billion on education in this country and $10 billion on curriculum. Think about that. We have, in 1983, Nation at Risk said that our country was not keeping up with the world. 2024, we're saying the same things into 25 now. It can't be that it's not a good place to invest. It's about how you invest and how you get access to both the money to build and secure and create great products and the money to purchase them so student results improve.
So let's go back to 5 or so years ago, early pandemic. So at the time, you had Imagine Learning in progress. You were really betting on and believing in the evolution of digital learning, digital tools, and you saw that line through to where it could go. And I think that was an example of a time when volatility and change opened up opportunities. Talk about that first, about that ride on this sort of digital adoption.
Well, the issues around how COVID and the pandemic changed our industry has to start with broadband in the schools, reliable speed delivered throughout our country, which was a rate-limiting step for anyone trying to deliver a big digital package. And when we got that through the money that flowed into schools for infrastructure, the TAM was immediately increased. And when I think about investing in our business and in looking at other business segments, I think about how big is the market. The digital market improved in a giant step when broadband was ubiquitous, and then the ESSER money came in behind it to double and triple that. And that is what allowed the run-up of values and the attraction of private equity buyers and all the things that we've been through over the last 5 years. And it created a permanent new slope to the line. It didn't, though, fund and fuel a future growth that was the same as that. And that is what we're all going through today, figuring out how to offer the best products that will excite markets and give students a chance to succeed. And that's where real innovation is going to matter most. We all got an uplift for those two reasons, and we all got to enjoy it. And Imagine Learning was one of the biggest players in that process.
Yeah. And what about for those who got an uplift during that time? There was a lot of money that came into the sector. There were a lot of transactions done back in that era. What happens now? What happens next with the next wave of transactions?
Well, I think that our industry has never been a quick place to make money, except for that period of time. And if you invest in our space, you have to be in it for a long, long time, and you have to focus on increasing performance of student outcomes so that the people who buy your products look good. And what's ahead of us now is a long grind of taking new technologies to enable a kind of learning that is not happening in our schools. We have to face facts. Our system is not working as well as it needs to, period. Money, making money, losing money, put that aside. What matters is that we use the opportunity that AI is providing to change some of the learning models so that parents can be involved in different ways, so that you know what your child's homework is that night and can ask her if she did it. It can all be served up in ways that were never possible before. That is where growth is going to come. But our buying cycle is annual, so it's going to take 5, 6, 7 years. And fund dynamics and private equity buyers have to be patient in ways that were not true during the pre-pandemic cycle. And we certainly view ourselves that way.
And let's shift to higher ed. So go back even further to your time at Kaplan and building from there. I mean, you were at the beginning of online higher ed, right? And
the Kaplan University today is Purdue Global.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's your take on that part of the sector right now? Where are the opportunities? Where is it going?
Well, what is Harvard going to do? I went to Harvard, those of you following. I mean, there are so many, we can't answer that question here. There's so many questions facing higher ed, but it starts with a basic premise that we financed four-year higher ed education for as many people who wanted it. And what that led to was millions of students having what's called some college, huge debt levels and not a degree. And what's coming, I think, with all of the challenge that higher ed has today is more and different choices for people to get educated after high school so they can get the best professional opportunities that they seek. And that's going to put pressure broadly on four-year institutions because ultimately there'll be fewer students that are making available a four-year residential experience. So higher ed is going to have to change. It's going to have to change dramatically, and it's going to affect the middle pack and down much more than the most elite schools who have endowments to weather all kinds of storms. But I will say to you, other countries are way ahead of us on this. That there are many ways to get post-secondary education that could lead to great professional lives.
Absolutely. As a mother of a junior in high school, I'm thinking about this a lot
well,
right now.
Junior year for your daughter, I can't help you with. That's a different problem.
Yeah. What other, so you've spent time in higher ed, you spent time in K-12. What other parts of education now would you be an investor in? Or do you think are good targets for investment?
Well, I think it starts with time frame, and I hope anyone who is investing in our space today has a longer time frame than they've ever had. I would say that obviously, again, looking at the TAM and its growth as a driving factor, special education has a lot of promise for two reasons. There's a lot of money and there's a lot of children who need it, and technology is enabling solutions for those girls and boys that were not possible before. And there are going to be big businesses built that don't yet exist, and the ones that are in it are doing well. So special education would be one. And second, the solution around higher ed training, paraprofessional training, and new ideas of ending high school and beginning college and online specialty educational solutions that get people into the workforce faster are another very interesting place to invest.
I know a special education company if anybody wants to talk later.
That'll be you.
Yeah. That would be Presence. Shameless plug. So I wanted to talk a little more about M&A, about building education businesses through acquisition. So going back to my time working with Jonathan at Kaplan, I did almost 80 acquisitions during that time, and I learned a lot.
How many?
Almost 77 acquisitions at Kaplan.
Oh, gee, was I part of all of them?
You were part of probably the first 50. Yeah.
Okay.
So I studied how to get deals done under you. And there are some things that I tell people now when they ask me for advice about how to approach M&A, how to get a deal done. One of the things that I'm curious if you still believe this now is about valuation. So one thing that I really learned from you then was that a slightly higher or slightly lower price is not going to turn a good deal into a bad deal or a bad deal into a good deal. You've got a thesis, you find an asset, you decide if that asset belongs in your company, and then you figure out how to get the best deal possible for it. Do you still feel that way? That 'cause some people get really hung up on valuation, I think, and might walk away.
The valuation. I've never been accused of paying too much money for things, and the bankers are laughing, although bankers don't laugh out loud. So, look, what you pay for something is driven by its value to you and its unique value to you. But you have a great benefit if you have a longer time frame. And that's why I keep saying over and over that if you're able to work on something for a long period of time and can accept failure along the way, you're way ahead. A fact that I love to quote, I wasn't there when he said it, but I've seen it and I've talked to people who were there. Roger Federer won 80% of his matches and only 54% of the points he played. When you buy something, you model out a projection, you have to assume you're only going to win 54% of the points. And what is it worth to you? And if you're able to come up with a value based on that assumption, it doesn't really matter what you pay. You're going to do well if you have the time to play it out. And we've been lucky enough to do that. I started at Kaplan with the Washington Post company, which was controlled by the Graham family, and Warren Buffett was the largest owner. And my relationship with my partners has been modeled after that in the best way that a sponsor-based partnership can be, and we've been able to use that long time frame. It's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage. Buying something and then immediately trying to consider how to sell it is never going to lead to the best outcome, and therefore paying more or paying a little less doesn't matter.
What would you say, looking back on all the deals you have done, what was like a great deal? One of the best acquisitions.
The best acquisition we ever did?
Yeah.
I ever did?
Yeah.
So in the crowd, it's hard to see, is a man named Wasim who brought me a business called, I don't even know what the company's name is, but its product was StudySync. And StudySync is, we believe, the best digital-first 6 through 12 product. It's distributed today by McGraw-Hill. And it's an unbelievable business, and more importantly, it changes outcomes for kids all over the country, and it is the largest provider of ELA curriculum for middle school and high school. And it was a weird deal because we bought it with a distribution agreement with another party, McGraw-Hill, who has been a great partner with us. And it was hard to decide to do that and pay up for that. It's run by a really talented group of people, and so it's been the best deal. I did try to be in the food business and failed miserably, so that was terrible. Turns out if you don't sell juice today, you can't sell it tomorrow. It's a very bad business, and I was not good at it. But we've done a lot of, Quest Education at Kaplan led to the gigantic outcome for Kaplan, and the team that is still running it is benefiting from that. But that would be the first one I say.
Cool. So let's switch gears, talk about building teams, building companies, and talent. So you're known for building teams and building talent that have gone on to run. People have gone on to run a lot of companies in our sector. I have a whole text chat group of my fellow female education CEOs who worked at Kaplan during Jonathan's time. Like, there's enough of us that there's a whole club of it. We mentioned I wrote my book, The Good Boss, about some of my experiences and some experiences of other women about who did they work for and how did that impact them. I'm going to read a passage. I have a quote in here from another woman who's a CEO in education today who worked for Jonathan, and this is what she said. She said, "The willingness to respect somebody enough to intellectually spar, to push on ideas, for a capable woman, it's gold. You get to show what you can really do." And that's how a lot of the people who worked for you feel, is that you were a good boss, not because you were nice to us, because you pushed.
Well, my partner Dawn is here, and together we have 6 children, and I tell them this all the time, although they don't buy it, that we're so good at it. So for the 6 of you, you hear that? Look, the best part of my career, I started in the education business in 1991, and I am still at it. The people that have worked with me and what they've done after working with me has been, the most rewarding part of my own journey. I wrote down a list and I showed it to Jessie, who emceed this last. She's on it, as are you, of CEOs that are active. I'm not sure if Rob Waldron is active or not, but he's on the list. And Andy, who still runs Kaplan, who I hired in '92. And Melissa Mack, the list is long and it's varied, and it's people doing great things. The guy who runs HBS Online, Patrick Mullane, ran the DC test prep business for us. And I think, the legacy of that and what all those talented women and men have done have made me the happiest in my own professional career. And it's continuing today at Imagine Learning. Imagine Learning has a kind of talent that's different than the service-based Kaplan, but the people there and what they're doing and gonna do when I'm done are, I hope, will be as magnificent.
Yeah, and that's it. And some of those people that you work with today also worked with us at Kaplan back in the day. So that's another fun thing, is to see the through line.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time. I do want to ask another question about your take on the environment that we're in today. So depending on which sector people are running businesses in, there's been a lot of chatter that I've heard today about what's your budget looking like for next year? Are you running a downside scenario? How low is that downside? Do you think that we should all be running downside scenarios?
Do I think what?
Do you think we should be running downside scenarios in our planning for the coming year? And
I think back to the Roger Federer quote. Yes, we're going to lose some points, all of us, and more importantly, we have to show that we're resilient in our ability and desire to invest when we are losing. The biggest challenge our industry faces is that companies with a lot of leverage or not a lot of free cash are not able to invest in their products when their products are good, and we need that to happen, and our industry needs that to happen. So modeling for a bad year, it's not going to be a good year. It can't be. The adoption cycle is pushed out, and there's the Department of Ed is, in the state that it's in. But again, our biggest opportunity as an industry is that $750 billion are spent on education in our country, and 10 of it's spent on curriculum. Most of it's in salaries and in facilities. We need to, as a country, reorder the distribution of those assets so that we get the best outcome. That is where growth is going to come for all players, figuring that out. And even if we model a down year, keep investing. Long-term success for our students relies on it.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, everyone.
Listen to this fun fact about our next panel. 2 of the companies represented, Stride and TAL Education Group, have a combined market value of over $20 billion. But what really matters is how they're using that scale to drive access, opportunity, and change in education and workforce development. Guiding the conversation will be rejoined by Richard Sarnoff. They got him doing double duty here, y'all. He's the chairman of, well, you guys already know because he came here before, so we're not going to repeat that. Chris Karen, CEO of Turnitin, which, by the way, my son is like, I really don't like that app because well, okay, you guys know. Alex Peng, President and CFO of TAL Education Group, James Rhyu, CEO of Stride, and Bijal Shah, CEO of Guild. Let's get the conversation going and welcome them to the stage.
Okay, well, you are all officially sick of me by now, but I'm going to continue. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists here to give a brief, and I mean brief, introduction of yourselves. And please mention something that has nothing to do with education, because depending on how this goes, that may be all you have left. So we'll start at the end of the row with you, Bijal.
Awesome. I'm Bijal Shah, the CEO of Guild. Guild works with large employers to help upskill and reskill their workforce. We play in the workforce development space. And something you should know that is not related to education is that I have no idea. I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I left very early this morning, and they were sad that I walked out the door.
James Rhyu, I'm the CEO at Stride. Our primary property is a company called K-12. K-12 provides full-time online learning here in the U.S. predominantly. And I also have a son who's just turned 20 this past weekend.
All right. Alex Peng, I'm the president and CFO of TAL Education. I think we're what we call ourselves a smart learning solutions provider for K-12. So it spans from in-person tutoring all the way to digital content and digital learning devices. We're founded in China. Now we're in more than 10 countries. Something about me, I have a hobby, which is fixing pocket watches, something that may not be replaced by AI anytime soon.
All right.
Great to see you guys all here. I'm Chris Karen, CEO of Turnitin, which is historically focused on enforcing academic integrity in universities, in research journals, and in high schools, mainly around writing. We've really now diving deep into how to help have AI be a positive, net positive on student learning outcomes and have students be able to graduate from college knowing how to use AI in their job, but not using AI to get through college in ways that teachers don't want. So we're in the middle of that right now, and it's been really rewarding, and it's going well. And then my advice, I'm on the board of the Ironman triathlon company, and I'm not a young kid, but I did my first one about a month ago, and it is like far and away the most exhilarating athletic accomplishment of my career. And if you guys do it, you can do it. You need 7 hours a week to train, but it is a total rush, and you're never too old unless you're not able to walk, I guess. So highly recommend the sport.
Okay, did not expect that, Chris, thanks. So I was gonna structure this as a, kind of a sober discussion of managing growth in volatile economic, political, social times, talk about AI, et cetera. But I think it's time at the end of lunch where we thrive on chaos a little bit. So let me pose my first question. This is, ASU+GSV is 15 years old. It kind of born with EdTech. And the idea was to drive better outcomes for students, for learners, for adults, through technology applied to education. The statistics do not tell a great story in terms of the success of that endeavor. So the question is, how is what we have done to education with EdTech, the story of ASU+GSV, the 10 billion or so that we've invested, is that not a story of failure? And if it's not, why not? And I'll start with you, James, because you inspired me to ask that question.
Well, I think we're doing a pre-call, and I sort of posed this question, which I've posed now to probably I think probably thousands of people to this point. Over the past 10 years, specific to K through 12 education, in the US, we've invested over $10 billion, I think as Richard mentioned, in startup companies. And in those 10 years, for the startup companies that are founder-led, started in the past 10 years, they all had business plans that were supposed to make them more than $100 million of revenue. They wouldn't get funded without that. And is there a single one founded in the past 10 years selling to K through 12 school districts, invested by VCs, that makes more than $100 million of revenue? And I think the answer to the question, Richard, is the answer to my question, which is, I think it's really been an abject failure over the past 10 years to drive innovation within the K through 12 ecosystem. And that's just one proxy of that. But I really think that with all the capital that's been deployed, we have had very little result for it. And if you think about it, I used to say there's 3 industries in the US that really need disruption: healthcare, the government, and education. Now, whether we like it or not, the first 2 seem like they're getting disrupted. We may not like it, but that's happening. But I think the third one, education, really is ripe for disruption. And really, Richard, as you posed the question, focusing on what are the outcomes we're looking for, because I think we've lost sight of the outcomes we're even looking for.
Richard, if I may.
Absolutely.
We haven't been operating much in the US in the last 10 years, so I couldn't specifically comment on that question. But there's something yesterday I shared on the AI show stage, which may in part explain what is the underlying cause of this observation we had. I think, you mentioned healthcare, government, and education. So the government, the Constitution was ratified, 1787 or so, if my US history still serves me right. So, but the current school system, the compulsory education for K-12, it was even earlier than that. It was 1760 or something in Prussia. So it's like an almost 300-year-old system that is trying to serve kids that are native to the artificial intelligence age. And I think that's just like the fundamental challenge, right? You have this pre-industrial age model where you have teachers, classrooms, standard curriculum, everybody going through that. It does a lot of good things. It actually brought basic level of education at scale, somewhat affordable. But I think we're just living in a fundamentally different age. That system by itself, I think, is just unlikely to create the outcome that we all love to see for our kids. I'm not saying completely get rid of it. There may be that discussion going on in this country, but by itself, it just feels it's not living up to the age anymore.
You talked about an outcome that was financial or economic in value, and I wonder if we're spending enough time talking about the academic outcome that is really important.
That was the direction of the original question.
Yeah.
But I think that they happen to be correlated. They're not necessarily need to be correlated. But I think we all know the academic outcomes in this country have declined. They've been on a pretty steady decline for many years. And at a time when I would argue investment's increasing, and at a time when the rest of the industries in this country are evolving rapidly. And so when you have stagnant to declining outcomes, when the other industries in this country are actually improving on their outcomes, there happens to be this correlation, I think, between sort of investment outcomes and academic outcomes.
James, let's let Michele make her comment, because I think it'll be...
I actually agree with you. What I'm saying is that you look at economic outcomes, that's one indicator that there's trouble or some issue. The second issue, in my opinion, is what are the actual outcomes for academic outcomes look like inside the United States in particular. We were just talking backstage about other countries, including China and India as well, in terms of where the focus is in the US versus where the focus is in some of those other countries. And I would say, like, net, you're right. It looks like we've gotten worse, not better. And then my question would be, great, can we like segment what has actually happened with those dollars? Because some of those dollars, as Jonathan just said in the last panel, you're not going to have a 100% hit rate. So you have to assume a 54%, I think is what he said, hit rate on what's going to happen. Can you look across that and figure out where are there key areas where you've actually seen a lot of progress and double down in those areas? I don't play in the K through 12 space, so I'm not sure, but that is something that I think would be super helpful.
Chris?
I think technology can have a positive impact, but it's definitely nowhere near a solve for the negative declining trend in student outcomes in K-12. I think competition is very good. It makes everyone better. I think student mindset has shifted dramatically since COVID, where it's just about get me the grade, and how can I spend the least amount of time doing the work to get the grade and get the degree, versus value the learning. And that's on the parent, I think, to help the student value learning and the importance of it. Yeah, it's really off the rails right now in terms of top in the world spending and way below average outcomes.
That sounds like healthcare, but let's answer a slightly different angle on that question, which is there a leap that we can take if knowledge is being commodified by AI? In other words, there's nothing anyone needs to know anymore. And thinking, starting now, is going to be commodified by AGI, by artificial general intelligence. What exactly should we be teaching or training or testing?
Yeah, I gave a talk to the Notre Dame Board of Directors last week, and my take at least is you're right. You don't have to be an expert anymore, experts available to help you, but you need to have great interpersonal skills, great communication skills, know how to work in teams, be creative.
Are we teaching any of those things?
No, we're not. So my point to the Notre Dame board was you got to redesign your curriculum to have all these things be the focus, and also graduate AI literate folks to go into the workforce. But that's what needs to change, and it's dramatic for a college to be relevant in this new age, in my opinion.
Richard, if I may, I think the way you think about this is we should think about it totally different from a calculator. A calculator does that one thing so much more superior than a human being can do. But this is very different. It can actually elevate the ceiling of creativity, of critical thinking, of the ability of a kid to do many things that we adults today would not even be thinking possible. So I think, the skills like curiosity, just the passion and drive and motivation to ask even the first single question to AI. I found that actually to be the hardest, sometimes to trigger a child to say, they probably were doing some other things that, you were trying to detect. But if you actually put them in front of a screen, say, here's a text window, type in a question, that becomes the harder thing, what question am I gonna ask? But it's really that if we can, as teachers, as educators, just instill that little bit of motivation and passion to ask the question.
Right, and Michele, it looked like you had something on the training side here.
I was just going to say, I think to Chris's point, investing in problem solving, critical thinking, interpersonal skills is super important. You asked, but are we actually investing in those things? We had a conversation about how in other countries, hard skills are the real focus. And I think as we think about the future, no, our K through 12 education system, even our higher education system, I think needs a lot of work to ensure that we are focused on both hard skills and then the soft skills of connection, empathy, the ability to lead and influence other individuals. But I actually think in order for us to be able to live in an augmented world with AI, we desperately need the ability to ensure that people are better critical thinkers. They know how to solve problems. They know how to use frameworks. They know how to use that technology to ideate and innovate in ways that I don't think we've seen in many centuries.
Right, and I think that's going to go to my next question, which is to turn that issue into an economic issue, because already in the industry, we've seen more than just signs that AI, when applied to knowledge industries, can turn mountains into molehills. I'm a board member of Chegg, and we've sort of seen what's happened with that company through cheap or free AI. Not that it'll be cheap or free forever, but it is for now. And then when we see AGI coming on, it'll just bulldoze those molehills potentially. So my question is, what kind of enterprise survives this onslaught, this unique onslaught, this moment that we're in best? What are the characteristics of that enterprise? And then we'll all invest in those enterprises. So Chris?
I'm bullish on two-year programs because they're a lot more affordable, because I think that the level of student debt is just criminal. Students that are even, like, people graduating college 12 years ago with student debt have, on average, more debt 12 years later than they had when they graduated. So, like, the economics of a four-year degree are just really under question unless it's a very, very top program. I think 2 years is going to get you the skills you need with AI to be a high-impact worker. So that's one big thing, I believe. The ability for a university to reinvent itself is incredibly hard to imagine. As Mark Andreessen gave a podcast and said, even turning around a restaurant is close to impossible. Like, when have you got no restaurants that's below average all of a sudden is excellent? Never in my experience. So his point is the ability for universities, basically with the power of faculty, to reinvent themselves is very hard. So my thought there is probably more upstart institutions like University of Austin, which don't have the legacy, hopefully become more available for more students going forward, because I think the ability for the established institutions to reinvent themselves is a long shot.
And anyone else have any views of enterprises that you think kind of are...
Yeah, if I may. And this also has something to do with, Richard, your prior question. I think we're focusing too much on teaching, what to teach, how we teach. And a few weeks ago, we asked a question internally at the company, like, if the students are going to know more than the teachers, how do we teach a class? But that's actually not a problem. It's how we help them learn more. It's focusing on learning. Mm-hmm. I think first, that's the mission. Is our mission teaching? Well, we know teaching based on our authority as teachers or helping students to learn. The second thing is the company itself. If it wants to be a learning solution provider, it better be able to learn on its own, like learn very different things. I think we, in the last few years, went from in-classroom teaching, online teaching. We learned about digital and print publishing, digital devices, all in the span of the last 3 years. It's all by teachers who learned and adapted, and I think that's really important. And the last thing I would say is, I think this needs to happen at the top. You're going to hear a lot of people say we're going to be all in on AI, this and that. But if people at the top of the company are not like there, working with AI, coding and doing whatever it is, with AI themselves, it's very, very hard to comprehend where this is going. You're just going to be like talking at a distance about this future.
I think for me, most of the panelists have already said the word, but it's really skills. I think that's the thing that I'd be investing in now. I think the concept's already starting to deteriorate where, there's sort of, you graduate high school and you go to college, and it's college that gives you the sort of the ability to go on and get a job. We're seeing a lot of large technology companies already break down the walls of, no college degree required. So I think it's really investing in skills. I think that's what the kids need, is us to be investing in their skills. And I think that the companies that are going to be able to really promote skills learning, starting at younger ages. Like, I think we keep having this paradigm of, they're going to learn skills in college. I think most of us probably would say that we don't really actually use a lot of what we learned in college in our jobs. So I think it's really the investment in skills to me.
Oh, you really set up Michele there, Dan.
I know. Except what I will say is that I actually think the most important skill to learn is the most important skill you need is the ability to learn. So to just go back to what Alex said, I think the organizations that will win are the ones who focus on learning for themselves and disrupting themselves. Organizations that are focused on actually teaching others, whether it's K through 12, whether it's adult working learners, whether it's seniors, on the ability to learn. And I think that that is what our society is going to need go forward, because we're going to have this divide happen in society where you're going to have people who really understand the fundamental concepts of how things work and they can be innovative and creative and problem solve. Like think about the Leonardo da Vinci's of the world and that era coming back, but being able to manifest in your head what the future looks like and then use these amazing tools to help make them happen. Or you're gonna have the trades aspect of things that need to happen and the ability to teach people how to learn and continue to learn in society. Those are the organizations that are gonna win.
I totally agree, and I would also, just to compare notes, would say technology probably has a very limited role to play there. It's really great teachers who can motivate and inspire you to want to learn, and hopefully parents play a big role there as well. So despite being in a technology company, education, I think that what you're describing is a big problem, and I think it's mostly a human-to-human problem to solve.
Yeah,
By the way, I almost want to redefine the word teacher. It's like a co-learner. I mean, I think in the future you're going to have the adult and the student learn something together. It's just, I mean, this is just
It's also changing the modality of learning to more hands-on learning, to more problem solving and testing what you're doing. It is turning the way we think about learning on its head to some degree to drive, like if people focused on the outcome of how are you driving curiosity, I think we'd be in a much better spot. And maybe that's correlated to economic outcomes. I mean, I think in the long run it might be, but you might not actually see those outcomes in the short term.
Right, and I think we will see some transformations in assessment as a result of those changes you just described. And is there anything that you're seeing, because you're as close to anyone in at least higher ed assessment?
Yeah, I think, so one, assessment's growing in importance, and work you do at home is, whether it's an essay, a problem set, a computer program, is becoming less important for your final grade at least. So they're not trusting that that work is being done authentically at home, and it largely, sadly, is not. So assessment becomes more important. AI-proof assessment becomes very important. So it means taking tests in environments where you can't easily get around to another device or access another web page to get support. So we are getting asked by customers to make whatever kind of test it might be, whether it's writing an essay in class, taking a multiple choice test, doing a short answer, to be on a device that is much less prone to having AI show up where it shouldn't. For example, we have a similar technology. We've delivered bar exams for years for would-be lawyers. Similar technology, but it's going to show it's up in
I think
the classroom.
this shows a little bit of the short-sightedness. If you were really looking at it from a different lens, you'd say, hey, if a kid isn't using, or if a potential lawyer isn't using AI, that's a problem. Figure out whether they're using it correctly or not is what you really want to do. But let's go on to a different issue, which is, and I'll pose this to the group. We have a panel that's particularly expert to answer this question. Can a major education company be truly international? Can we see, maybe for the first time, a truly global education company, or is that impossible? Why or why not? I think you will all have views on that.
I would just say I think Khan Academy probably is the best candidate today. Can't speak for how multilingual they are, but AI will solve that.
Khan Academy, okay.
Well, I have to say yes, absolutely.
Yes, I know. I set it up for you.
I know. I mean, look, I think all the barriers we used to think were really, really hard to break down in education. Content awareness, cultural awareness, language barriers, all these things, they're breaking down by AI. They're just like, we're seeing it literally, this minute, right? A team, let's say in Beijing, will be able to create, with the help of AI, the highest quality English language-based material, education content. I'm not worried about that. Now, I'm not going to here to comment on the different policies. I think that's, let's assume that's not a prohibitive barrier. I think, today you see even the most complex type of services business model can be, established across borders. We see many examples of these. All the different technology are making that possible. And I think fundamentally, that's also where you're going to have, you're going to help solve some of the economic issues. The affordability of providing services to kids in many parts of the country, the world needs this kind of international supply chain of teaching resources, of content resources, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think a short answer is yes, and I think it's, again, it sort of focuses back on skills because, you know, in sort of the more traditional model of education, it is somewhat dependent upon local regulations, sort of local policy, local culture, whereas when you focus from the angle of skills, I think it sort of breaks a lot of those down. A lot of the skills sort of cross borders and things like that. And so I think from the angle of skills, you can be a dominant education company that has, you know, an international footprint. And I think you're starting already to see some of those skill-based companies now, and we're not one of them, but there are some sort of skill-based companies that have I think you have a pretty international footprint that you know, that focus on skills.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for a lot of companies, if they can get a common lexicon across their workforce, you then run into a world where they can utilize that information to decide how to drive learning development, workforce development across their global workforce, which then means for a provider like us who's talking to multinational companies, we are having conversations about what does your global workforce need. We can then take that back to the academic institutions we work with to say, here are ways that you could actually drive utilization of your curriculum outside of the US markets. And AI just fuels, you know, fire on that with the ability to drive translation, to make things more contextually relevant, to drive personalization. There are a lot of benefits it provides that allow for that to happen, I think, in a more accelerated fashion than it would happen otherwise.
Okay, fair enough. So here's another one of a number of audience members who would be interested in the answer to this question. With education becoming increasingly polarized, and I don't mean just politically, but I mean economically, to what extent are your companies forced to concentrate on wealthier populations because they can afford to pay for your services versus a larger set of populations that are, you know, unfortunately don't have the resources to access these sort of better tools and modalities of education?
I mean, we're really lucky. We work with large employers who are invested in ensuring that they can bring along specifically frontline workers, which is where we started, in helping to upskill and reskill them. And so I do think to the notion of who's the payer in a world where you can create more payer options in the system so that one individual isn't taking on the burden, you have the ability to create access for all. And so we continue to be really grateful to our employer partners and the learning partners who are in our marketplace because we can provide something that generally for the populations we serve was something that was unattainable before their employer stepped in to help support and enable them.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the very best use of money to improve a child's direction, grade-wise, learning-wise, is private tutoring. And private tutoring is probably the most expensive thing you could try to get. So therefore, it's not available in most of the world for most kids. Even here in the US, I think AI is going to change that dramatically, and not a chat bot, but actual it's probably an video avatar that is super motivating, knows what you need to learn, knows what you're good at, knows what makes you funny, and it'll be nearly free. So that, I think, is going to be the biggest positive impact AI has on education, is this global, nearly free, world's best tutor on your phone, which will have, in my opinion, a huge, huge impact on global.
Right, and that avatar may be your grandparent or something.
You can pick it.
Yeah,
you could Barack Obama. It could be Miley Cyrus, whoever you want.
Miley Cyrus, that's an interesting reference. Okay.
Richard, if I may.
Einstein.
Richard, if I may. By the way, I think the most expensive type of education is private school. It's all the way up here. It's even more expensive than private tutor, right? Because it's like really expensive. So look, I think our company in the last 2 decades has actually gone the direction of, we started with one of the more expensive choices. You take one subject for a year, it's like $1,500 for one subject for a year. We went down by 30–40% of that when we went online. So basically, we can broadcast to unlimited number of kids. And then we went down even further when we started, Richard, you know, you're familiar with this space, print and digital publishing. So basically, our product can be sold for like, you know, $50, $60. That you will have the same benefit. And then with our digital device, you know, some of my financial friends tell me that this is crazy. Basically, we put into the device content that used to be sold when they were sold in class, something like $50,000. Just because we really believe that the penetration, that universal outreach to everybody who would benefit from this is so important for our education mission, but eventually also for our economic mission. We're literally seeing that we're serving kids from places where we would never be able to build a profitable learning center, but they can learn from the device, they can learn from online. So I think this is truly something I believe. Lastly, I see our CTO out there in that table. CTO Aaron, he's building that universal AI tutor right now that can actually provide multi-language, on the spot, AI support across subject to anybody. Now, it's not going to replace teacher and learning completely.
Just a question, is that Miley Cyrus you're building? Understood. James?
No, yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything to add. I agree. Technology is going to drive down the price and cost for companies to deliver education, and I think it's just going to keep going down. And I think that's going to be good for society at large, and it's going to provide more access across the globe.
But Richard, may I just add one final thought?
Of course.
But I think what's going to be really most precious and could be really costly is that human in the loop. We still need the human to inspire, to give the motivation. I mean, they can be a light touch. It doesn't have to be 24 hours there with the kid, but I fundamentally believe you still need human in the loop to do that. And I think really the challenge is, how do we inspire young people to get into the business of inspire another set of young people? Because I think that's really the existential challenge, is that young, talented, passionate people not coming into education and learning.
Well, I think inspiration is actually the theme of my last question, which is we're coming into a world where people need to be multi-hyphenate increasingly, because there'll be more time outside of whatever your career is, for however you define whether you're doing an Ironman triathlon or self-actualizing some other way. And I'm wondering how each of you view the potential of this group, the potential of ASU+GSV to create things that we would define as education in a broad sense, but not in the narrow sense that we've been talking about so far. And how would you participate in that?
I can go first. Just as a parent, if you're working on tools that utilize AI to help a parent better engage with their children on learning and building curiosity and learning and investing more efficient time and being able to help your kids, I would be deeply inspired and interested in that. And it's partially because of what Alex said, which is the human component is going to become more and more critical. And as a parent, I'm the one who needs to inspire my kids and motivate them and excite them to want to learn. And so putting the tools in my hand to help do that for them and with them would be super exciting. And today it's really hard to find tools that help.
You studied the Renaissance, to be clear. Chris?
Yeah, so I think the average American worker worked 60 hours a week 100 years ago, and now it's like 35. So I'm hopeful with AI, it's not half the country out of work, but most people just work less hours and have more free time. And I, like Bijal, would definitely invest it back in teaching my kids, but also their classmates. I'd want to be a coach, guest lecturer, tutor if they'll allow me. I think most parents have a hard time tutoring kids, but I'd put the energy and free time there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this Uberization of work, everybody doing 5, 6 jobs, I think it's just in front of us. I'm the president and CFO of the company. I also code with AI for an hour every day, writing demos for our product teams. It's, I think it's there. It's just how you use these tools. So one of the things that I said yesterday at the AI show, we're putting this thing called beta.edu.com, which is really giving some of the tools to teachers to create new type of things. And I think, by the way, teachers are some of the best learners. As I said, most of our business leaders in our teams, in our top team, are teachers, and they're doing things that they never thought they were going to do.
No question. James, last word on this?
Yeah, I think we're out of time, but I would say, I think we have to embrace institutional change. I think that, to me, is the thing that all the participants here can really engage with and embrace institutional change. I think that's going to help the country.
Thank you, and thank you very much, panel. And thank you guys for lasting the entire lunch. This is kind of like Oprah. If you look under your seat, there'll be a certificate for a brand new Mercedes E-Class convertible. Oh, no, that wouldn't be the case. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And you get a car, and you get a car. Everybody gets that was a memorable moment that time. Thank you so much to our panel. Thanks for tuning in, folks that were joining us virtually. There are book signings that are taking place, so make sure you don't miss out on that. And we will see you back here at 6 p.m.